Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. Rival Palestinian leaders President Mahmoud Abbas and Hamas's Ismail Haniyeh announced a reconciliation committee after their recent meeting in Egypt. It came just days after the two leaders came face-to-face in Ankara, where they both met with the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Ankara, which has maintained good relations with both leaders, has pushed for a two-state solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The two leaders continued their talks in the Egyptian coastal city of Alamein. Abbas later met with President Abdel-Fattah El-Sisi, who welcomed continued dialogue between the Palestinian groups. Political divisions between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas began in 2007. The Reconciliation Committee comes as Israeli forces renewed their aggression in the occupied territories. More than 100 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied West Bank so far this year. Israel is also witnessing nationwide protests against Netanyahu's judicial overhaul. And to further discuss the Palestinian unity talks, joining me now from Vibo Valentia, Italy, is Jos Hilterman. He is the Middle East and North Africa Program Director at Crisis Group. And from Bethlehem in the occupied West Bank, Majid Shihadeh. He is the Vice President for Academic Affairs at Dar al-Khalima University. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Jos, let me begin with you. Is there any significance to the Turkish president's meeting in Ankara with Palestinian leaders Abbas and Haniyeh at the same time? What do you make of its timing?
So I think it's timed after the Turkish elections. It has more to do with Turkish politics than with Palestinian politics. The unity talks between Hamas and Fatah have been going on for a long time without any kind of progress. There was no positive prognosis now, but I think that now that President Erdogan feels solid in the saddle, he wants to take advantage, rightly I think, of the rapprochement with Egypt in particular to insert himself into this process. The Egyptians are closer to Fatah, Turkey is closer to Hamas, and so both of them could serve as useful intermediaries, even though, again, I don't think much will happen anytime soon.
So, Majid, what do you think? Are you hopeful, and how well is Türkiye positioned in brokering a possible agreement between the two factions?
I think I agree, as I already talked before, agree with the first speaker in general. And I think I have little hope of both parties reaching an agreement. And even if they reach, as I argue often, the main thing at the end will be we have the Israeli government who decides how things go on. So even if they manage to have an agreement, the last, the last party that will allow things to go forward is the Israeli government. And we know from record that they don't do that.
So, Jos, are Hamas and Fatah ready to reconcile? Is there now a common ground for that? And what are the main challenges that you see?
Well, they're clearly not ready. And the latest talks in Ankara and Cairo prove it. They're not ready. They tried 2 years ago, or three years ago, and then leading up to the planned elections in 2021. But when President Abu Mazen realized that he would lose those elections, then all the talk of elections and of reconciliation with Hamas were off the table. I think at this point, there is really no prospect of any kind of progress between them. Fatah is too divided, too fragmented, to want to go into a reconciliation agreement with Hamas when it feels it's going to be losing out in that agreement.
So, Majid, talk to us about the shape of the domestic politics in both Palestinian administrations. Are they as divided as Jos mentions? And how do ordinary Palestinians view these developments? And are they hopeful or are they ready to reunite?
I think all political parties, wherever they exist, they get created not to have kind of unity with other political parties. The purpose of political party to offer an alternative and to be in a leading position. And that's also the case in Palestinian politics. So Hamas was not created or did not exist to go along and become in a unity with Fatah or any other party in that case. So political parties in general compete, and political parties in general try to lead the political system wherever they exist. And that's what we see in Palestine, the same thing. And in this case, between Hamas and Fatah, because both are the largest political parties, they continue to compete who will be leading the Palestinian political system.
So you both are of the same view that neither Egypt nor Türkiye could strike a deal between the rival factions of Palestinian politics. But could there be any coordination between Türkiye and Egypt on this particular issue? Or how do you see it? Do they compete over this?
Well, they can coordinate even when they compete. As I said earlier, there is Turkey tends to be closer to Hamas, which is, of course, the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. And Egypt is clearly not close to Hamas, but can talk with them. It's much closer to Fatah, or what's left of it. So, yes, there could be coordination between the two sides, but they are coming at it from their own political angles.
So, Majid, how has Israel's normalization with several Arab and Gulf countries impacted Hamas's position as well as of Fatah?
I think going back to the previous question and connecting that to this one, even if Turkey and Egypt manage to coordinate and not compete, in the end, it's the Israeli government is the party that lets things take place or not take place. And Israeli relationship with Arab countries didn't really change its policy and politics and practices towards the Palestinian people, whether in Gaza or in the West Bank. So I'm not in the view that Israeli relationship with Arab countries changes the politics or it has an impact on Palestinian politics. The opposite, because in the end, Israel continues its policies of land confiscation, house destruction, arrest, attacks on refugee camps, on towns. The Israeli policies are not impacted by its relationship to Turkey or to Egypt. Israel is a part of a global Western system dominated by the US, but Europe is also part of that. And as long as Israel feels comfortable in that global structure and not pressured to change,
yes,
it will continue its policies.
So,
and I think I won't put too much hope whether Hamas and Fatah agree to coordinate or not, or whether Turkey and Egypt coordinate to bring the Palestinian factions together. Because in the end, the power of everything in our lives is run by Israel. Even normal life, how to enter, how to leave, how to live.
Yes. So, yes, if not for Egypt and Türkiye to mediate between the Palestinian factions, a few months ago, China has offered to mediate between the Palestinian factions and facilitate peace talks with Israel. What do you make of it, and what kind of a role could it play to solve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict?
Well, now you've raised it from reconciliation between Hamas and Fatah to solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I think the solution is very, very, very far away, and China would not be able to make any difference in that respect. But it could mediate and try to take over the role of the United States to some extent, but the United States will block it at every step. The other thing is, as Dr. Majid said correctly, Israel it's the last thing they want is reconciliation between Hamas and Fatah, because it wants a divided Palestinian political polity. It has done so consistently from the very beginning and will continue to do so. It's the only way to prevail in the long term, which, of course, they're well on their way to doing. The other thing is about the Abraham Accords. We have to be very clear. The Arab states that signed on, so the UAE in particular and Bahrain, Morocco also, they have no interest in doing anything for the Palestinians, frankly, unless there is some kind of violence at the Holy Esplanade at Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. But other than that, they really don't want to get involved. So that leaves Hamas and Fatah on their own, and on their own, Fatah is never, ever going to reconcile because they are too weak. And Hamas, as Dr. Majid said, doesn't want to reconcile really when it thinks it's the stronger one of the two.
Okay, so Majid, if we leave Türkiye, Egypt, Israel, let's say, and the United States out, what's at stake for China to revive the Israeli-Palestinian peace process? I mean, how has this move added to Beijing's international standing? Because it has been dominating the de-escalation process in the Middle East lately.
I think maybe China could do something between Iran and Saudi Arabia. But when it comes to Israel, Israel is a different story. I don't think anyone would think of Israel in isolation from Western Europe and the US. And that's a different story here. Like, China cannot be a mediator between Israel and the Palestinians because Israel is not alone in this game or in this conflict, as they call it. Israel is doing what it's doing by the money and the political support and the diplomatic support and the armed support that it gets from Europe and the US. And without that, Israel cannot do what it does. So all the other parties who try to mediate and so on, that's nice. But I don't think it will be effective in any way.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.